Should
تفضل يا
I
ابونا.
should I start? Okay.
Yeah.
In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, one God, Amen. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, now and ever, unto the age of all ages. Amen. It's nice to be with you all. I can see there are a number of participants on Zoom. I want to say hello to each and every one of you, but I can't see all your faces and I can't see all your names. So hello to all, and it's a blessing to be with Abuna Butros and with all the servants at Edge. So this is the topic we've addressed before, and I've been asked to address again. So I'm gonna try and combine some stuff, some old, some new. It is about how do I choose the right partner for life, or looking at essentials or important considerations when one looks for a partner, a life partner. So, first, I wanted to start by saying that around the globe, young men and women, they have listed uh, two things that they consider to be top criteria for marriage. And I'm not sure if I think Zoom allows us to interact a little bit. So, what do you think are those two top listed by young men and women, those two top criteria for marriage?
Hi, Abuna.
Hi.
Maybe
Who's-
having a similar. This is Micheline.
Hi, Micheline. How are you?
I'm good. I'm gonna say maybe having similar values
Good.
would be one of them.
Yep. Okay, that's good. I agree with you, but it wasn't the top two that people listed.
So, Buna,
But
may I say
I
something?
agree. I agree with you 100%. Amir?
Yeah, so maybe the ability to love, the ability to give, the ability to sacrifice.
So love was one of them. That's true. Love was one of the criteria, the top two criteria for marriage. What do you think the second one would have been? So I have someone. Attractiveness. Yes, that is correct. That was sent by chat. So yes, attraction and love were the top two criteria for marriage ranked by young men and young women. And they rank those two above personality traits. However, the research post-marital shows that the most happily married couple are those who, regardless of what they think they wanted from a partner or in marriage, they simply end up with spouses who have excellent personality traits. Excellent personality traits. A character. Character is key when picking a partner. It is very important, and that's across the globe, according to the research that was done. And some of you may be familiar with some of that research. Some of it we actually use in our premarital inventory, or the premarital retreat that we do in Prepare, called Prepare and Enrich, which actually looks at emotional stability and something called agreeableness. How far would two people agree over an array of different areas or different aspects of a relationship? So emotional stability, how well a person can handle their feelings in crisis or in problem or in a turmoil. So how emotionally stable one is, and the other the other factor was agreeableness. And just to define for you what this specifically means. So a person with a high level of agreeableness in a personality test is usually warm, friendly, and tactful. So they generally they have an optimistic view of life, of human nature, and they get along well with others. Some of the sub traits of this agreeableness is a person is trustworthy, a person has good morality, is altruistic, so thinks of other people, serves other people, considers other people. Cooperative is a modest person and and has empathy. So again, I will say them again: trust, morality, altruism, cooperation, modesty, and empathy. Those are some of the sub traits of agreeableness. And so they have been linked, emotional stability and agreeableness have been linked to marital and sexual satisfaction in marriage. It's no surprise. It is better to have a warm, cooperative mate than an unstable, disagreeable one. So research is telling us something that we would logically consider. So you may be thinking that the spouses with excellent traits, they sound boring, you know, like they have all the nice traits, but you want someone who's very attractive, who's quite interesting, and believe you're willing to put up with some moodiness or arrogance, even that you're meeting with that partner, to have that type of attraction. But consider how these quote unquote, arrogant, or the arrogance that shows the moody individual, consider how they derive attention. Basically, they are only sporadically emotionally or physically available. So they're not always there. They're not always generous with their time. They're not always generous with their feelings. And they're sporadically available, which gives the impression that access to them is something very precious, is scarce, and thus a valuable resource, something that you have to do extra work in order to receive or to get. So their love and good moods must be earned. Later on, this is something that you discover in marriage. That what really attracted you initially in that person's personality may have very well been just this person's how he portrays or she portrays herself in such a way that makes you want to earn their attention. So it's a process that holds at bay any objective evaluation of their character. So you're blinded or could be blinded. And this is not unheard of. This is actually quite common. They say, oh, wow, I was very attractive to their character, to how strong they were, to not all the aspects of the character, though, that we will speak about, but to just being interesting and being attractive, only to find that they're not available emotionally. So again, I highlight here that emotional stability is very important. Agreeableness with all the sub traits that I mentioned is quite important as two criteria linked to marital and sexual satisfaction post marriage. I suspect that what many decent people in such relationships or marriage don't realize until they have endured a very long stretch of unfairness during their marriage is that this partner who is not humble, is not modest, but is the contrary to that. We can say arrogant or prideful or hard to get and so on. They enter the relationship expecting special consideration. So the type of person that requires you to do extra in order to get their attention. They've come into the relationship expecting a special consideration. Much like in a dating relationship in which the party who desires the other more must accommodate the other's wishes. So the partner begins to feel some sort of dominance, that my partner is dominating me. It seems like I have to work extra and I have to hold back so that I don't upset my partner. And over the dating period, that may be something that they're able to manage. But after, in marriage, for life, as time goes on, they're not able to carry on with this partner dominance and this holding back that style that they have adapted themselves to, only to please again their partner. So, and again, the other partner, so it's more of a cycle. The other partner continues to assume more and more you will do more than have the work to compensate for your for that lower desirability that they may be seeing you in. So the point here is attractiveness and love are important. They're not, I'm not saying they're not important, but they're not your top two priority or considerations or top two criteria that one should look for. You may not be initially attracted to someone. However, that attraction may develop, but you may be interested in the character and the personality traits, the emotional stability of someone, and their agreeableness, and the commonality between you and your partner and that partner. So looking for qualities that are the foundation of a good relationship. So throw in some examples. What do you think, in your opinion, would be important in a person's character? Let's just focus our discussion on the personality trait or character. What would you say would be essential in a person's character that you would be interested to pursue life with? God-fearing. Okay, that I saw from a chat. God-fearing. Integrity. Kindness. Let's add to the list. Honesty. Simplicity. I mean, a lot of these things require some definitions. Respect. So someone who respects you, respect themselves, respect others. Humor. Yeah, that would be nice. Someone says complexity. Not selfish. So, okay. Open-minded. Selflessness. That's a nice one. Someone who's ambitious. We can take a couple more. Grounded. So grounded, I would assume that is connected to emotional stability. Adventurous. Okay. Generous. I like that one too. Ability to communicate openly. So there is an aspect of communication that must be there. Excellent. Ability to communicate openly. Thoughtfulness. So considerate. Okay. Loyal. Respecting. Okay. Sociability. Patient. Excellent. I think we're gonna stop at that. I'm gonna try and put them all together and put some of these together, and you can add to that if you like. So the qualities of a person that help to build the foundation of a good marriage. You've named a good number of them. I'd say empathy is important. Empathy is important. The ability to put myself in someone else's shoes and see the whatever situation we're in, or to see how they're thinking, to understand from someone else's perspective. And a lot of the conflict that exists between couples exists because a person only sees their own point of view and cannot get out of themselves to see somebody else's point of view. Their point of view happens to be the most correct, and they can't see that there are other perspectives to a certain situation. So empathy is very important. And the ability to show empathy, not just the ability to mentally go through the exercise of seeing through someone else's eyes, but actually to show that person empathy, to show them understanding, to show them that, you can actually join them in the way they feel and the way they think, even if it's different than your own. So empathy is important. Integrity is another important quality of a person. And most of you spoke about honesty, and someone even said the word integrity. This is very important. A person who they say what they do, and they do what they say, and there is no gap between the way they say things and the way they tell people to do things and the way they live their own lives. Under that falls honesty as well. Honesty with one's feelings, honesty with one's dealings with anything and everything that they do in life, honesty in even the way they interact with you. So in empathy, integrity, honesty. There is another one, I don't know if someone mentioned it or not, reliability. Someone you can rely on, maybe responsible, would can fall under a category of reliability. Someone you can rely on, you can count on, you can uh, uh, know that you are safe and secure with. They're reliable. They're reliable. They're not. You don't feel that there is any dishonesty in the way they deal with you. So it's connected to honesty, but you can depend on them. Someone who is kind. I don't know if someone mentioned kindness. Yes, it was the third one mentioned. Kindness is very important, because it shows in the way a person, again, resolves conflict with their partner, in the way a person handles issues with their partner, kindness in the words they use, especially at the time of conflict. So kindness is quite important, and emotional generosity. Now, this is something that some of us are not very familiar with. Maybe we grew up holding back our feelings, but it is quite important in relationship to learn. Even if in all my life, I've learned to be reserved and not to show emotions because it had helped me survive during certain years of my childhood. But in my relationship with a partner, I cannot be stingy with my emotions. I have to be generous. I have to be able to share my feelings and to share also the feelings that my partner is in need of. So empathy, integrity, honesty, reliability, kindness, emotional generosity. I recall for you some of the subtraits of agreeableness: trust, morality, altruism, cooperation, modesty, empathy. So there is a bit of an overlap there. If you find these qualities in someone, then be curious about pursuing it further, even if they may not seem like your type on the surface. A lot of people just close some very good relationship because they're just not attracted to start, or because of some gut feeling, and so on and so forth. If you believe that some of these traits, personality traits, exist in someone because you've been talking to them or connecting with them, they are quite important. I wouldn't overlook them. Other criteria like sense of humor, world traveler, they're nice to have. They're nice to have, but they're not necessarily essential criteria for choosing your partner. They're nice to have. There may be the additional stuff to have, but we're talking today about essential considerations, the basic foundation. So I want to give you, like, in addition to personality traits, let's talk about key criteria for choosing the right partner. I'm going to give you 6. The first one is selecting someone who has a like-minded commitment with you in the pursuit of holiness. So a lot of people in our environment, they meet with people of different faith and maybe also of different set of values. That's quite dangerous. I know that sometimes we're attracted to a person or we like someone, but we're not of the same faith. And we're not like-minded, even though within the same faith, but we're not like-minded in the pursuit of holiness. Someone considers life with God to be a priority, another one doesn't really. And that could definitely and would definitely create a conflict in this partnership or in this marriage. So remember the triangle with Christ or with God, where you have one partner like husband, wife, and God. And as both of them are pursuing holiness, are coming closer and closer to God, they also come closer to one another. This is a diagram that illustrates a very important fact, that having the same faith and having similar direction, like the same direction towards God, is an important and essential factor in in choosing a partner, a suitable partner. Also, is God at the center of your partner's life? And yours, of course. So when we speak of choosing a partner, we also reflect on us being the appropriate and suitable partner for someone else. It's not just about scrutinizing someone else. It actually is first about myself and reflecting on myself. So is God the center of my life? Is God the center of the life of my partner? Do they live out their faith in their day-to-day life? Do you see it lived out in the way they interact with others and the way they handle their business or their job or whatever there is? Is Christ alive in that person? There is this idea or misconception sometimes that I can bring someone who is very far from God to God. That is true. You can bring someone close to God, but you have to understand that that person needs to grow, and there is definitely this area where they have to overcome and they have to work on, which is their distance that they had with the Lord and with the church and with the way we worship and so on. So I can't close my eyes and say love prevails. You know, as long as we love one another, then everything else will settle. That is not necessarily true at all. So having a common faith, common values, and being able to share something as foundational as God and as faith, excuse me, is very important. Um, I, we deal a lot with interracial marriages and interfaith marriages where someone has converted into Coptic Orthodoxy and all. And I can tell you that those who truly convert, truly come to faith and embrace it, they become excellent partners. But some people may just go through the motion. They don't oppose the idea of coming into faith, but they are still into their old habits. Eventually, in marriage, that would create trouble and would create some sort of disparity and some sort of a gap between partners. So the first is selecting someone who has a like-minded commitment to you and with you in the pursuit of holiness. And that includes faith, common faith, and common practice. Second, selecting someone with a Christian attitude toward material things. We live in a materialistic world. How do we handle that? That is very important. So it's more blessed to give than to receive. We're told in the book of Acts chapter 20, verse 35. Am I and is that partner caring more to give than to receive, or is that at least part of their attitude towards money and towards materialistic things? Does he or she feel deprived because they have to, and I hear this is funny, but they have to shop at an X store versus another, like shop at the Bay versus Harry Rosen, for example. Again, how do we view materialistic things? Their generosity, their almsgiving, the way they think about donation and giving to the needy and to the poor, and to giving to their tithing and all that. This is again a reflection of someone's handling of materialism, of money, and of the materialistic things of this world. The meaning of money to them. So what does money mean to them? And you'd be surprised, different people have different meanings for what money actually is or means to them. So some people, it's safety and security. To someone else, it is entertainment, and it is to be spent on just having a good life, and so on. So again, understanding their meaning of money and materialism or materialistic things is important. Are they always looking to put into the marriage relationship, or mainly seeking to take out for themselves? Again, this reflects on generosity, and reflects on their view of what marriage is. Marriage is just for me. I need this, I want this, versus no, it's a give and take. I receive some, I give some, and at times I have to give more because my partner is vulnerable or my partner is in need. So selecting someone who has a like-minded commitments to you and with you in the pursuit of holiness. Second, selecting someone with a Christian attitude towards the materialistic world or material things in the world and so on. Thirdly, um, how observing the way they interact in relationships with others. So how do they treat and how do they relate to their own parents? How do they speak to you about their own parents? That's very important and quite reflective of the way they understand and they handle interpersonal relationship and quite intimate ones like their parents. Um, how do they interact with their siblings of the same gender or the opposite gender? And that's also a window into seeing how they relate to the other people and how they interact with them and how do they speak about them and so on and so forth. So that's how they act in interpersonal relationship. Number four, I said there's six. So number four is how they proactively interrelate with other people. So do they have any differential treatment of people based on position, on socioeconomic status, and so on? You just need to see how they interrelate and how do they see the relationship with other people of different walks in life. Again, it shows you their view of humanity, of other people, of valuing people, and so on and so forth. So we can put those two close together. Number five, as some of you said, communication. How do they communicate? Are you able to read them? Are they accessible to you? Can you, or is it too hard? You can hardly understand what's going on with them. Are they able to verbalize what's going on? When are they able to put words to their feelings and let you in and understand what's going on with them? So again, do they give contradictory statements that get you puzzled? I'm not sure. You said you're okay, but you're acting like you're not okay. And all the communication stuff that you guys have heard of before and have talked about and are probably available in many books. But to be open, let your face reflect your heart, to be accessible, to be able to communicate and put words to express how you're feeling, and definitely not to give contradictory statements, like I'm fine, when a person is not fine. You can tell that from their nonverbal, even though their verbal communication says they're okay. Conflict resolution styles as well. How do they resolve their conflict? Do they always compromise? Do they always accommodate? Do they always solve their conflicts by being aggressive and tough? Do they just avoid to enter into any conflict at all costs? Again, understanding the different conflict styles and which one is the most common to your partner is important. So you have those who avoid, those who are assertive, those who are self-confident, those who are dominant, and so on. And the last point is what we talked about initially, emotional stability, but I add to it accessibility and response, which speaks about empathy as well. So emotional stability, how do I handle turmoil? How do I handle when things are not emotionally stable, or when there is a crisis or a problem? Again, you want to make sure that your partner is not an explosive type, is not an emotional outburst like person, but is someone who's able to handle their feelings, go through the issues, able to work through the problem step by step, or somehow in a stable way. Um, you you want them also to be accessible, as you also need to be accessible. As I said, it's a two-way thing, and to be responsive. meaning that when they see you expressing a certain emotion, they're able to give you a proper response to that. They're able to stay with you, with your vulnerability, with your time of this emotionality, and they're able to stay just right there and handle you and talk to you and work with you. Some of these are skills that can be learned, but the ability of the person or their openness to learn them is also important. So let me summarize what I said. Selecting someone who has like-minded commitment with you and with you in the pursuit of holiness. Having a Christ-based relationship is very important. Selecting someone with a Christian attitude towards material things and materialism and money and so on and so forth. This speaks of generosity, of honesty, of the meaning of money and so on. Are they looking at putting into the marriage as much as they're receiving, or they expect everything to be just them being on the receiving end and that's it? Number three, how they act in interpersonal relationships, especially with their parents and their siblings and their friends. Also, how proactive they are interrelating with other people, and whether they discriminate or they have anything that would be a red flag about handling or interacting with certain people and so on, their view of humanity and their view of other people. Number five, their communication and their conflict resolution style. And number six, their emotional stability and how accessible they are. You're able to read them, you're able to understand them, and you're able to work with them, and they're able to work with you, and they're responsive to you when you have a certain emotional need or a need in general. They provide an appropriate response versus someone who sees you in distress and they're talking and they begin talking about something else that relates to them, or they're thinking of something else consistently, and despite the fact that you bring it up, they're still not changing that type of response. And again, like I said, many of these things can be learned, but the openness of a person to learn them is very important. So when you're looking to choose a partner, there are some essential things to consider. Some people have just a very long list that is unattainable. We need to keep it simple. We need to keep it simple. If I put it in 6 points, it's different than when someone really have these unattainable criteria. So for many single people, the older they get, the longer their list grows. This is found in one of the research that I was looking into. The list just keeps growing, and some people could wallpaper an entire house with their checklist. It's a good idea to think through what is important in the opposite sex to you personally, but you can't develop a checklist of 1,000 things that no person this side of heaven could ever fulfill. It's important to be realistic and to be open to connecting with people. And I know that a lot of people, they don't want any sort of traditional connection or a priest saying meet so and so, and so they just want it to be seamless. That's fine. I guess that's a preference. However, if I want to be very honest with you, the way you meet someone is not as important as what happens after the meeting and what you see after the meeting. So if some of us can consider overcoming some of the what I would call it's not your preference of how you first meet, but having a realistic, short but essential list of key things that must be there, and being open to meeting people and interacting with people, I think that would be quite beneficial because, as they always say, do not judge a book by its cover, because there could be some stuff very interesting inside that book, but the cover wasn't that attractive. So character issues, which I started with, these are very important faith issues are very important. They say that if you're looking for a man, make sure that the man is responsible and kind, in addition to some of the stuff we mentioned. But kindness is very important to see in a man, and to be responsible, someone who can be reliable, is quite important. To be honest, those initial traits that I mentioned. And one last thing that I didn't really speak much about, but also acceptance by the family is important. It's something to consider, because marriage is always a marriage of families. Whether you like it or not, in your partner, there is a bit of his father and a bit of his mom. And there's a bit of his environment in general, and also in yourself. So understanding that and connecting with the family and being accepted by the family is also another matter of importance. That's basically what I had to discuss with you, and I'm open to hear your thoughts and your opinion and your comments, and if you have also any questions. Glory be to God forever and ever. I'm advertising for Edge.
Thank you, thank you, Abuna, for the talk, and for if you remember, this is one of Edge's giveaway in the retreats. Abuna is still using, so Edge's giveaways are so valuable and useful. If anyone has a comment or a question, please, you can ask. You can enable your mic and ask, or you could ask in the chat.
How can you meet someone right now without attending any meetings?
Zoom.
Yeah, I know.
Or Zumba. Sorry, Abun, I just had to say this. تفضل يا أبونا، تفضل يا أبونا.
Yes, I mean, we do live in a very challenging time in the last 2 weeks. Hopefully that will not remain forever. As Pope Shenouda used to always say, it will end. Everything has an end. So hopefully that will not be forever. I can't think about myself being in the house forever. So, but again, I don't specifically encourage online dating. However, I did hear of some Christian sites that are very respectful and very useful, and some people have gotten married through them. But again, this is not a permanent solution to your question. I say we would go back and we would meet, and we would, like I said, be open to meeting with people and not judging someone by their cover, like by just, not interacting with them enough to see what's in that person's personality. People feel, so I hear from a few people, that they feel that they're prejudged before they enter in the relationship, and that kind of intimidates them. So I honestly, and forgive me if I'm saying something that doesn't sit too well with some, but we have to be easier with one another. We have to be more open to connecting and not afraid as adults to interact and meet new people, and also not afraid of the risk of, quote unquote, something not working out. Because if it's not going to work out, it's better that it doesn't work out now than later on after marriage. And I think that's a given. So can you go over how to address when someone is passive aggressive, also when they're not taking your emotions seriously, like they make fun of it? I mean, you have to be very assertive. You have to hold your ground. You have to understand the impact of this passive aggressiveness on you first, and what it makes you do such as avoidance, for example, or it makes you shy away from speaking up. And that's why I said assertiveness is very important. And you definitely need, as a couple, you would need a guidance from a priest or from maybe a counselor. But someone who's passive aggressive, they also need to work on that. That's quite dangerous. To being passive, again, depending on what's the degree of this passive aggressiveness, but it is quite dangerous. So this would be something that that person would need to work on for sure. And on your end, you need to become more assertive. You need to overcome, if there is partner dominance, you need to speak about it. You need to verbalize it. You need to take guidance from your father of confession or a counselor or a priest. And you need to continue to speak about your feelings in a serious way and request that they be taken seriously. So you have that on your end, but also your partner also has what they need to work on as well. What age considerations should guys keep in mind when choosing someone? You probably heard the age gap between a guy and a girl. Generally speaking, it is preferred because of the aging, the difference in the rate of aging and how male age versus female and how that shows and so on, that the male be older than the female. I don't know if you're still hearing me. Are you still hearing me? Yeah. And the gap would be something reasonable. They say 3 to 5 is ideal, 3.5, 4 is ideal. But there have been 10-year gap, but anything beyond that, I think it does require some sort of clearance. Even the church would tell you, can you go for counseling? Can you make sure everything is okay? Can you understand the implications that could happen over years? Not necessarily now when you're young, but when you're much older, and it would require you to be aware of that before you pursue it. Abuna, please, if you want to intervene and say and add to that, if you could, that would be great.
No, thank you, Bonan. Maybe let me add one more question. What do you think of an age gap that is maybe around 10, 12 years old?
So it's not unheard of, but like I said, you need to understand, some people are 10 years older than you. Like I'm talking here, a male who's 10 or 12 years older than the female, but they look very young and they act very young and their lifestyle is very young. So that also can be taken in consideration. However, it is something to consider as you get older. So that's why I said the church would speak to you, maybe send you to a counselor to understand what could happen because of this age gap. If it's 15 years, 12, 15 years, and so on, and that you understand it and you've worked through it before you pursue it. And I think in some cases you have to actually sign that you understand that and you're taking responsibility for that.
Yeah, Ibuna, you're right. My understanding is church-wise, if it is 10 years or older, the church would ask both parties to sign a kind of a consent that they have been advised about some of the implications, but they understand, they're aware about it, and they checked it, and they want to still pursue the relationship.
How can you be emotionally generous without being too emotional? So emotionally generous doesn't actually mean to be emotional, like in the sense of pouring out one's emotions. Emotionally generous could simply mean being present and available when someone is in need to share their own feelings. To be emotionally accessible, that means your partner is able to see what's going on with you, or to see some of it or most of it, because you are putting it in words. And this is something people can learn, is to say, I feel very disappointed today versus I feel angry, which is, like a general statement for all our feelings. I feel angry, I feel frustrated. Well, what's going on behind that, to be able to access and go deeper into actually how you're feeling? So you can be present emotionally by being attentive to someone's feelings. That's part of it. And you can also be learn to verbalize how you're feeling, and it's not about being too emotional. It's not about being like one of the points that I had here. This is funny, so take it with a grain of salt. Okay, 4 types of men you should run away from: the one who is always broke, the mama's boy, the sad sack, the master manipulator. And 4 types of women you should run away from: damsel in distress, the psycho, emotional outburst, the control freak, and the needy one. This is funny, so just take it as it is with a grain of salt. But part of it is damsel in distress, always crying and always needing someone to lift her up and all that. Sometimes this is a way of attraction, of seeking attraction, but is not a healthy way of seeking attraction. So that's on emotional stability. If you found those traits and started talking to them, and it goes well, but you seem to initiate the conversation most of the time. Sometimes they seem to be open in conversation and sometimes reserved. So it's about being open or reserved in conversation. Do you stop, or what do you do in the relationship? No, I think you should pursue it further. You should see whether this is something that you can work with or not, and what are the reasons behind the reservation or holding back on their end. So I wouldn't say no to stop. I wouldn't say stop. I'd say pursue and understand what's going on. Understand the dynamic between you and that partner a little bit better, and actually more and more by speaking specifically around that. There must be a reason why that person is holding back, or sometimes they are quite conservative. Maybe that's how they learned to be with their feelings, and a lot of guys are like that. Again, because of how men have been socialized in this world in general, not to show weakness, not to show emotions, and so on and so forth. So it is something to pursue further, not to just end the relationship based on. Come from a good home. What if you don't come from a good home environment and bad relationship with parents, but it's something you're working to overcome and trying to be different? That's the key. All of us have some sort of baggage, all of us. Some are heavier baggage than others, but we all have something we need to work on. So as long as that person is working on it properly, to really get over whatever impact his or her past have had on them, then that's okay. As long as they're working on it and you're seeing that the impact on your relationship with that partner is getting, is getting better. It's not impacting the relationship as it used to because of the work that your partner has been doing. That's great. Can you repeat the characteristics again? So are you referring to the agreeableness? We said trustworthy, good morality, altruism, cooperative or cooperation, modesty, and empathy. We said empathy, integrity, honesty, reliability, kindness, and emotional generosity. Those would be the quality of a person: empathy, integrity, honesty, reliability, kindness, and emotional generosity. And I would say that if all this is in a person's character because of their relationship with God, then now we have that foundation that I mentioned as key, which is the foundation of faith, the foundation of living, as someone who is united with God, with Christ, and living that out of that good place. Abuna, what did you say at the beginning about the important considerations? This was before you talked about the important traits. You had mentioned agreeableness. Yes, I said agreeableness and emotional stability. So people have listed attraction and love above personality traits. However, the research shows that the people who have reported the highest marital satisfaction and sexual satisfaction in marriage are those who have a spouse, they have emotional stability, high emotional stability, and they have high agreeableness. What do you think of long distance relationship? It's tough. It is possible, but it's tough. It does require work because of insecurities that are normally present in the relationship to start. And the person isn't there. And a lot of people who have actually distant relationship, when the person comes back from wherever they're at, they feel that the relationship is a lot smoother because you're just there in front of each other. There's something about seeing and being in front of the person. We were just created bone out of bone, flesh out of flesh. So there is this natural attraction that exists physically. And distance relationship, they can work, but they require understanding and they require a lot of work. It is hard work. So is it a no or worth trying? Like, again, it depends on many other factors. It depends on who that person is, on the many, some of the 6 criteria that we've mentioned here. So it depends on other commonality between you and that person. And if that person is really good, then yes. However, it does require work, and it's bumpy. It's bumpy, but it could be workable. It's just a lot harder. It's like saying, for example, similar to saying interrelationships. I cannot say no to them. I wouldn't say no to them, but I'd say there are considerations that need to be taken. There are factors that need to be taken in consideration, and it's not a blank yes either, because there are cultural differences that need to be overcome. They need to adapt to someone else's culture, and they need to adapt to yours as well. So that's hard work. Hi, Bona. Like to keep. Okay, sure. Do you have any tips on how to get your old-fashioned parents to let you explore a relationship without forcing you to rush? Yeah. Abuna Butros, help me out here. This is a very good question, and quite common, by the way. Sometimes parents, they want to rush you, yes. So how to get them to let you explore a relationship without forcing you to rush? It's a very, it's hard to answer specifically, but your parents. And as an adult, you can try and convince them, logically speak to them. You can. This is a tough one. Like this is a very good question and a tough question, to be honest with you, because you cannot make anyone do anything. Like you cannot make your parents change. You can hardly change yourself. So to answer the question of how to make your parents let you explore a relationship, that's a very tough one. You have to convince them. You have to act as an adult in dealing with them and in dealing with with other people. Maybe take the advice of your father of confession. Maybe the involvement of your spiritual guide or father of confession could help. Who knows? I've seen it happen where intervening, and speaking to the parents and explaining to them, your daughter or your son is not going to meet someone the old-fashioned way. They just need months, to get to know someone without any labels. And at that age, someone in their 20s, which is different maybe than what the parents are used to. I don't know if Abuna has any better tips or specific tips to add, or
definitely nothing better than Abuna, but I agree with Otsak, Abuna. It's a challenging situation. One thing that comes to my mind is maybe the need to enrich the relationship with the parents. I think this needs to take place regardless. Because as you mentioned, Abuna, at the beginning, one of the things is the marriage is between 2 families. So getting your parents on board, I think this is important. So maybe this is a calling to get you to enrich your own personal relationship with your parents. That's number one. Number two is maybe choose the right time. Sometimes I know people who involve their parents, even when it is an idea, just to get suggestions to keep them on board, and this goes smooth. Some choose to maybe postpone this a little bit until the right time. So you choose, but at the same time, I think it's important to involve parents in the process, so that so that there wouldn't be any surprises suddenly. No, what, I'm not happy with this person, regardless, or you know what, you need to get married right now. So enriching the relationship with the parents and choose the right time, knowing your parents, uh, in a summary way.
Thank you, Abuna. You said do not close the door on gut feelings. How can we tell if this gut feeling is self-sabotage or a sign from God? Well, the signs from God are very clear and obvious, and they get reaffirmed the more you pray and the more you connect with that person. So it's a huge difference between just a gut feeling that is unchecked and a gut feeling that has been checked and has been checked and checked and checked, and it's quite clear that it's no longer just a gut feeling, that it's something that is a clear sign from God, through you not closing the door but interacting with that person more, and then being verifying whether that gut feeling was real, was true, or was not. How important is it for a guy to be able to show you that they cherish you? That's part of emotional generosity. It is important. It is important. It's something that couples need to work on, or a partner need to work on. Is this a nice to have, or is it critical in a relationship? I think it's a critical thing in a relationship, especially if someone is flagging it, because then if that dynamic continues and you're not able to adapt to it, if you've tried and you're not able to adapt to it, then it becomes a skewed relationship where you're always in need of emotions and your partner is always not giving you these emotions. This becomes critical, becomes quite critical. It's a dynamic. If you're not able to work out and work through, then it could become a problem in marriage. How can I know the girl is from God and his right time? That's a good question. Um, I mean, going through some of what we said today would be one thing to consider. Uh, Again, God is not going to send you a bad girl, or is not going to send a bad person to you. That's not how God works. But He also gave us a way to choose. He gave us something of His, which is rationality. This is given to humans from God, the ability to work through things and matters and consider them and think about them and balance them with guidance, divine guidance as well. So if the essentials are there, that we've talked about, they're there, and your family is blessing it, her family is blessing it, your fathers of confession are blessing it, your interaction. So when I say the criteria, I mean also part of that is your interaction with that person is good, so God will make that a prosperous relationship if you work hard to keep the relationship. We always say marriage is hard work, and it's not greener on the other side of the fence. It is greener where you water it. So it does require daily watering, and it does require enhancement and work. Marriage is not something we do once and that's it. We expect it to float. We have to keep it always growing. And the right time? Well, the right time means that you're both mature emotionally, stable financially, spiritually, I mean, there are all the stuff we talked about, and it is the right, it's the right time because it is a suitable time. Again, we know from Eric Erickson that between the age of 20, early 20s and mid 30s, that's or early 30s and mid 30s, that's really the time when you're looking for a partner. So that would also be a suitable time, given also the other criteria. How important is it for a guy to be able to, we finished that. How do you find out someone's true color, time frame wise? Usually people are in fear if someone is true and genuine in character, because there could be a turning point and then your emotions are too invested in a relationship. Yeah, that's a risk that comes with relationships. I will say it bluntly. It's a risk that comes with love. However, people initially, they're prudent, they're careful. They don't get too invested until they see signs. We're created again this way. We begin to trust as we become vulnerable. We check things out where we just don't become vulnerable blindly, or we shouldn't. And so we interact and we test the waters. We check things out, and if things are going well, then we pursue it further. We become more vulnerable, and so on. But it does come with the risk of hurt, and people do get hurt here or there, whether it be your perception, or maybe the action of another, or both. So time, I can't give you a specific time frame, but people usually would get to know one another over a few months. 4 or 5 months before they're able to say, yeah, this seems like it's the right thing, going well. But the tricky part is you might feel one thing, but your partner feels a different thing. And that's the risk. You may feel comfortable, but only to discover that your partner isn't. That's just a risk that exists. If someone has great character, but they're not your usual type, personality-wise, what would you advise? To work it out. Personality types don't have to match at all. And this is something that people learn when we do the premarital, is that you can actually work with any personality type. We're not talking personality disorders. We're talking personality types. So, if we say there are 4 or 5 personality types, depending on the test that you do, you can work with that personality type, understand the personality type and how to interact with them, and they can understand yours and how to interact with you. It's like the languages of love. We all speak languages of love, but they're different, or we prioritize them differently. So there is learning there. I can learn the language of love of my partner, and they can learn my language of love, and therefore we can communicate love in a better way. How do you go about dealing with a partner? How many more questions can I take, Abuna? One more? Abuna Butrus, I can't hear you.
Sorry. Can we take a couple of questions, Abuna, and then conclude?
Sure.
So 2 questions.
Okay. How do you go about dealing with a partner who does not want to pursue counseling, always puts the blame on the other? The other meaning yourself? If that's the case, and they're not really wanting counseling, it's a red flag. I'll be honest with you, because I've seen this many times. When I hear something of that description, it doesn't mean, because I don't know you and I don't know your partner. So what I'm saying is a statement, a blank statement is general, it's not specific. But I always am very careful with narcissistic personality disorders or narcissistic people. They're very difficult to handle and very difficult to deal with. And they tend to blame others, never see the fault in themselves, never say sorry, never take ownership of their actions. So I don't know if this fits that or not, but I would say this is a red flag, something to be looked into. The last question. How should you approach someone you would like to date for marriage who is not of the faith? If they were open to converting, how do you approach this conversion, and how would you describe the process for marriage to them? So the first thing I would say is it starts with you personally, and you valuing your faith, and you valuing your tradition, and understand why, even though you're born in it, why you're remaining in it. It really stems from us first. And if you value your faith and you value your tradition and you know why, you would want your partner to see it and know it. So you become invitational. You understand why, because some people say, well, if I'm not converting to them, I can't really ask them to convert to mine. But that reflects a lack of appreciation and value and understanding of your own tradition and faith. And I'm saying it bluntly, we're speaking openly and honestly. That's why I'm saying first you must understand. I know some people who said to their partners during the dating time, I will never leave my God or my church. And they said it whichever way they said it, of course. And they were so invitational, so open to inviting them to the church and to meet with the priest and go through the process of catechism and all that. And those are the partners that I've seen are servants in the church today. Because they saw in their Coptic partner the value, the true, genuine evaluation and appreciation of their own faith. Otherwise, it becomes like a process that people go through, and it doesn't produce, like I said initially in my talk, a stable couple in the church. So the process would be to bring them to your father of confession, and then they either attend class, or if your father of confession sits with them individually, they catechize them, they give them books to read, and they follow up with them, and they sit with them, and they invite them, and hopefully they can also introduce them to a group of people, because the church isn't just the faith that is learned, but the faith that is lived in community. And that's why any catechismal class or program should include people to welcome that new person, so that they can assimilate the church. They can look at the church at one point and say, this is now my church. And thank God we have churches that offer these services and are not as ethnic as some other churches. And we have groups or services that can help them with that as well. And you can describe the process for them as you would learn about the faith. And then when you come to the faith, this is a choice that they need to make, not for you, but first and foremost for themselves in relationship with God, before they make it for you. Because if they make it for you today, they will step out of it later. Not necessarily by converting back to their faith, but there will become real obstacles. There will be real obstacles to going to liturgy, to coming to service, to coming to church, to taking communion, to even some of the values that inform our parenting styles, and so on and so forth. And so that's why I said I don't say no to interracial marriages. On the contrary, I'm okay with them as long as the partners can work through what they need to work through. Thank you.
Thank you, Abuna. Thank you very much. And thank you, everyone. If you'd allow me, Abuna, just 1 minute to reflect on something that came as a quick follow-up on one of the questions about the ages. If the age difference is reversed, where the girl is older than the guy, I would follow what Otsak said, like it depends on the personality, the maturity, the character, the traits. And usually, generally, I think it's okay, or it's common. I have seen recently where the girl is 2 to 3 years older. More than this, I would be kind of a bit cautious for kind of many reasons. And again, usually these reasons with the age difference are not discoverable right now, not identifiable right now. You might not identify it right now, but actually, usually with a higher percentage, they would impact the relationship maybe 20 years down the road, 15 years down the road, and we're aiming for a lifelong commitment, not just 10, 15, 20 years. We're aiming for life forever. So we care if after 10, if after 15, 20 years, things are already going to happen after 10, 15 years. So adding the age component might add a bit of a complexity. So it's something to consider. 2 years, 2, 3 years where the age where the girl is older, I think is reasonable. It's okay, provided that you identify that the personality, maturity between both of you, there is a reasonable compatibility, then I think it should be fine. And as Abuna mentioned, guidance by mentor, spiritual mentor, father of confession would be helpful as well. Thank you, Abuna, very much. Thank you, everyone.